Hey guys, welcome to the J-Chip Show. My name is J-Chip, and today I'm going to be doing a PlayStation 1 collection video. Here is my PlayStation 1. I don't really use it because I mainly use my PS2 as my PS1, but it's nice to have one just because of the memories I have with it. The PlayStation 1 was actually my introduction to video games. I remember sneaking into my brother's room and playing Resident Evil 1, and the rest is history, you know? If I never did that, I probably wouldn't be seeing you today. First up, we have Alundra 2. Now, to be honest, I haven't played a lot of this. I kind of want to get Alundra 1 and then beat it and then beat this one. But from what I played, it was pretty fun. Next up, Blaster Master Blasting Again. Another game that I only played for a little bit. Enjoyed it for what it was. I prefer the NES Blaster Master, but it's not bad. It was pretty fun. Burstrick Wakeboarding. Pretty fun racing game in the water. Next up, Dino Crisis. Now, I did a Dino Crisis review, and any game that I reviewed in this collection I will put in the description below, so definitely check it out. And Dino Crisis is an amazing game. It's one of my favorites of all time, and Capcom, you really need to remake that. Up next, Driver 2. Never played Driver 1, but I did play this back in the day, and I thought it was pretty cool knowing that you can drive around, but I think GTA did this better. Duke Nukem, Time to Kill. Duke Nukem is a pretty cool character, and this is one of my favorite ones. This is where they stopped using the first-person perspective, and they started to do more Tomb Raider. As a matter of fact, this was called Dude Raider at the time, but it's pretty fun. And Duke Nukem is a pretty funny guy. Next up, Epidemic. I've only tested this game. I haven't even taken out the sticker, but I've only tested this game, and I don't really have much of an opinion, but I would like to get into this game someday, so yeah. Up next, Fear Effect. I'm a huge survival horror fan, and I hear so many good things about Fear Effect. It kind of reminds me of Ghost in the Shell, that really cool anime movie, but again, haven't gotten far into this, but I definitely will someday. And it's got 4 discs. Here come the Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy Origins, which is Final Fantasy 1 and 2. This is the only way I've experienced Final Fantasy 2. I haven't played any of the other ports. And for Final Fantasy 1 on the PS1, it's better than the NES one, but I think the PSP version is still the best way to play the first Final Fantasy game. I had Final Fantasy Chronicles, but that's being lent out to somebody. Up next, Final Fantasy Anthology, which is Final Fantasies 5 and 6. Final Fantasy 6 is one of my favorite Final Fantasies. In fact, it's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And I think the Super Nintendo one is definitely better, but I don't know. It's Final Fantasy 6, and it's really good. I think this version is not that bad. And the music in Final Fantasy VI is just so sexy. Up next, I'm pretty sure you guys never heard of this game. Final Fantasy VII. I mean, it's pretty underground. No one's ever played it. But yeah, it is one of the best Final Fantasy games out there. I haven't played the remake. I do want to get it. But in terms of my ranking of Final Fantasy, this isn't up there in like the top 3, but it is definitely in my top 5. So yeah, maybe a top 5 Final Fantasy games would be cool. Up next, a controversial one, Final Fantasy VIII. Now, Final Fantasy VIII gets a lot of shit, and honestly, I really like this game. I enjoy the Final Fantasy trilogy on PS1, so like the 7, 8, 9, and I think this one's still just as good as Final Fantasy VII, but obviously I don't prefer it. It's my least favorite out of that trilogy, but it's still really good, and definitely give it a try. Up next is probably my favorite RPG of all time, Final Fantasy IX. I love everything about the characters, the story. It's got some of the best music, and it's just overall a fun game. The story is dark, and it can be uplifting at times, but definitely one of my favorite RPGs. I really should do a Let's Play of this just because of how much I love this game so much, and maybe I will. Up next, Galarians. Galarians is weird. I have not beaten this game yet, but from what I have played, it's just fucking weird. Like the graphics are the characters, I mean, are just so weird, and the story is just off the wall. I don't know what to say about that game other than it's just weird. Up next, Grind Session. Now, Grind Session is a skateboarding game, and it's not Tony Hawk, but it is pretty fun. Definitely would play Tony Hawk Pro Skater over this, but I mean, it wasn't bad. I got it for $1. Up next, one of the best games of all time. I mean, one of the rarest PS1 games of all time. I bet all of you are going to be jealous, and you're going to be like, bro, how did you get that? But Madden 99, one of the rarest games I've ever played. But sometimes you just need a sports title, and, you know, Madden's always like the go-to, but it's not bad. It's not Madden 05, but it's not bad. Up next, Metal Gear Solid. I mean, what's there to say about this game that hasn't already been said? It's one of the best cinematic games. It's got a really cool story. Solid Snake's awesome. And the voice acting is really fucking good in this game. Like, I could not put this down when I first played it, and, you know, definitely a game I want to let's play. And, yeah, Solid Snake, he's the man. Up next, Nightmare Creatures. I did a review of this game, so that will be in the description below. I thought it was pretty good. You know, I haven't played it again since I did that review, but I remember really liking it. Check out my review for my opinions. Up next, Rayman 2. Now, I haven't played Rayman 1, and I haven't played a lot of the Rayman games, but from when I played this one, it was pretty fun. It's got a really charming story, and yeah, I'm looking forward to beating this game and the rest of the franchise. Speaking of franchises, probably one of my favorite franchises of all time, Resident Evil. I got the long box edition. It's super awesome. But also, I got the smaller one. Now, there's no real big difference between this and the long box version. The only difference is the packaging. That's pretty much it. But Resident Evil 1, classic game. Love it so much. Speaking of Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Director's Cut. Now, they promised you all of the gory stuff in the opening cutscene and some other stuff, and they didn't do it, but, I mean, it's a good way to play Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 2, my favorite video game of all time. Man, I love Resident Evil 2 so much. So much so, I have it twice. Now, the only difference is that this was the copy that was released when Resident Evil 2 came out, and this was the re-release. This came with the Extreme Battle Mode, and you got to play as Chris. And also, you got the DualShock support, which I never use. I'm always a D-pad guy when it comes to Resident Evil. But Resident Evil 2, fantastic game. I love it so much. And I bought it twice because I love it so much. Up next, Resident Evil 3. I mean, look at him. He's Nemesis. He's badass. He's one of the best bosses in Resident Evil history. He's so cool. And Jill is awesome in this game. I love this game. I like the remake, but I do like this a lot more. Up next, the redheaded stepchild of the Resident Evil franchise, Resident Evil Survivor. Now, I kind of like this game just because of how bad it is. It's kind of like The Room of Resident Evil. It's just so bad, but I love it at the same time. You got the main character, Ark, which is a piece of shit character. He sucks so bad, but I love him at the same time. Oh, man. I definitely gotta do a Let's Play of this, and it's a very short game. You can beat it in, like, under an hour. And, yeah, the story doesn't make sense. The character sucks. This game's not great, but I love it at the same time. Up next, Parasite Eve. Parasite Eve is a fantastic horror RPG. I love the New York setting, and Aya is one of my favorite female protagonists of all time. And Eve is a pretty cool villain too. I just love this game as a whole. It's so amazing, and I don't know why SquareSoft or Square Enix hasn't done like a sequel, a remake, or a reboot, or just something. Like, we need more Parasite Eve. It's so fucking good. Up next, another skateboarding game, Street Skater 2. Again, I'd rather play Tony Hawk, but this is pretty fun. Not as good as Tony Hawk, but I don't mind this game. It's got a cool soundtrack, and yeah, it's not Tony Hawk, but it's not bad. Up next, Siphon Filter 2. Haven't played it, honestly. I don't have Siphon Filter 1, which is kind of odd because that's kind of a common game. But I do also have Siphon Filter 3, so once I get one, I will definitely play this game because I have 2 more Siphon Filters back on that PS2 collection. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finding the first one. It can't be that expensive, can it? Up next, Tomb Raider 3. I like the Tomb Raider games. I played them as a kid, and I thought Lara Croft was a pretty cool character. Now, I do think the reboot series that was released on Xbox 360 is a lot better. I just think it controls so much better. But, I mean, the original Tomb Raider games on PlayStation have a lot of charm. Up next, my favorite skateboarding game of all time, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Amazing game. Fantastic soundtrack. Fantastic controls, and this still controls very well. I like the remake a lot, but I love this one just as much. I think this is an amazing game, and I can play it whenever I'm bored. And yeah, probably while I'm editing this video, I'm playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 because I just love it so much. Last 2 games. Wild Arms is fantastic. It's got some of the best music. And while I'm not into country music at all, I think this has a pretty good soundtrack. And I like the Wild West feeling that this game has, so it's pretty cool. The story is kind of generic, but it's a really fun RPG, and I like it a lot. And lastly, Wild Arms 2. Not as good as Wild Arms 1, kind of a step down, but it's not a bad RPG nonetheless. It's definitely longer because it's got 2 discs. But yeah, Wild Arms 2, not a bad game, but Wild Arms 1 is definitely better. Alright guys, so that's my PS1 collection. Not a lot of stuff, but I do think I got some of the heavy hitters like the Final Fantasies and the Resident Evils. There's definitely a lot more that I want. I definitely want to get the Spyro trilogy and the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. And Silent Hill would be awesome. But let me know down in the comment section below what games you think I should add into this collection or games that you recommend. Let me know down below. And if you have a PS1 collection, let me know what you got. And also, comment down below what is your favorite PlayStation 1 game of all time. Mine, I mean, obviously, I'm wearing it. Resident Evil 2. Is my favorite game of all time, so I gotta pick it. But besides that, probably Final Fantasy 9. I just love that game so much. But thank you so much for watching the video. Please hit that subscribe button. Stay classy.